Hey, everybody. My guest on the show today is somebody that I've gotten to know over the last few months, and we actually talked about doing this a few months ago, and here we are, finally scheduling, both busy, and I think we want to make this conversation meaningful and timely. Sheila, I have Sheila Wilkinson with me today. Sheila is a joyful lawyer and entrepreneur. So who doesn't want more joy in their life? Sheila, I can't wait for you to spread the joy here with all of us today. Welcome. So glad we made this happen.
Yeah, thanks for making it happen, but also thanks for asking. I feel like who doesn't want more joy? I think people want more joy, but
God, I hope so.
They think it's not attainable, but
that's right. So they want it, but they don't maybe know how to get it or what the next step is, which I think we're going to talk about that today.
We are.
I think that's something you and I are very aligned on. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. I can't wait to hear the answer to this first question, because I know that you are a woman of many interests, like many disparate interests. So what is one thing that you nerd out about?
Oh, one thing I nerd out about. Can it be two things? No, just kidding.
Fine. We'll break the rules right at the top. Two things. What's two things you nerd out about? Let's break the rules here.
Honestly, I think that I nerd out about like processes. Like, I know that sounds like a really boring thing to some people, perhaps, but so I grew up in a house like full of food, full of love, full of recipes and all the things. And over time, I just grew to love like the process of like creating something better. And I think that like recipes as a kid, like growing up, like people always ask me about recipes. Like, oh, can I have the recipe to that thing you cooked? And I'm like, good luck. I took it from like 10 different recipes, and then I took the best of the best of the best out, and then I made my own recipe in it. And I think that's really like, for me, the nerding out happens in the processes. Like it happens in figuring out like, how is this working? Why is this not working? How can we make this better? What can be that like incremental experimental change that we can make to make it the best? And so don't get me started. Why are you asking me something about nerding out? The very first question, because I could just keep going. But I think for me, it's processes. I think for me, it's about creating the thing that is going to help you sort of work at your best. And I do this at home. It's not just in the workplace, right? It's not just in my business. It's like life. Like once I have a system in place, once I have a process in place, I want the process to continue. And if I see an area where it needs to get better, I just tweak the thing and then it runs even better. Right. And so,
Oh man, I have a question for you about this.
Okay.
You and I know each other through a specific community, and you work for yourself, and I know you do some other things. We'll probably talk about this. I work for myself. There is a million people that would like to sell us a million different processes on the quote unquote right way to do it in our business. Right. Right, Sheila. Do you generally find that intuitively you can do it as well as anybody could sell it to you for, in terms of like what works for your business and the way that you operate?
Well, I don't use anyone else's processes. I do what feels right for me.
Yeah.
So you have to start somewhere, obviously, that you learn about something, you go, oh, let me try that. But I don't just use that process because that's someone else's process. I figure out how to make that process mine, or if it doesn't work, I let it go. But I do what's right for me. So it's the same kind of thing that I'm doing with my clients. It's like, what do you want to do? Like, how do you want to communicate with your client? How do you want to have that, that intake process? How do you want to, follow up with them to get testimonial, like whatever, right? Like whatever these things are processes that we're creating. I don't like it when people try to sell me their right way to do things. And this is also, okay, so I should put some disclosure. Can I put some disclosure in here?
Please.
So I don't know how familiar you are with human design.
I'm quite familiar.
Quite familiar. Okay, good. All right. So I'm an emo projector 5/1. So basically I know the right way. I know all the information about the right way. I know the right way for me. Get out of my way.
Yeah.
I want to help people make that thing that works best for them. Right. And I want to do it my way. Like, don't tell me that there's a better way, because I promise you that I have done all kinds of research and I figured out the best way, not the best way, but the best way for me. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't until I learned human design and like understood all of the pieces of that puzzle that I'm like, oh, that is my superpower.
Yeah.
So
No,
when you
totally.
say like, what do you nerd out about? Like my whole life I've nerded out about that, but I didn't realize that that was how I was designed to be. I just thought that it was like some cool thing that I had, you know?
It's so funny. I'm the opposite. I'm a pure manifesting generator. So I just totally trust myself without having to know the how. I'm like,
that explains everything.
Yeah.
Well,
and here we are.
But yeah, but also, you know, especially when you're a manifesting generator, you're like skipping all the steps. Like you're supposed to skip the steps. You're supposed to say, where do I want to go? Oh, let me just go over to that place. And then when you realize, oops, I forgot a couple of steps.
Yeah.
You like backtrack and then you get to things and the tweaking and the stuff. Yeah.
Welcome to my world. Good, bad, and indifferent.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my clients
That's why
are
we need each other.
generators.
That's why we all need each other, though.
Exactly.
Exactly. I've complained about this on the podcast a couple times, and we'll move on here. But I think you and I are very aligned in this. One thing that is probably my biggest pet peeve in the personal development space, the coaching space specifically, is when I see somebody and their marketing is, here's my 18-step process to unlocking your potential, or something about a process. Dude, I'm like, how the heck would you know what's going to be the thing that's right for Jason or for Sheila? Now we can, as coaches, we know that we sit with our clients and unlock that together. But anybody who's pitching to me that they know the way, that is an immediate, I will probably never do business with that thing.
Right.
Like the 5-step process to unlimited wealth. I'm like, you have no idea how much money I already have, nor what my risk appetite is. Like, you don't know those things. And I understand that some of that is just marketing, but between the nerding out conversation and me getting on my soapbox, we could be here for the next hour, but we're not going to, because we're going to get to know you more.
You're in charge.
Your emotional generators. So so Sheila, what's something that is inside of your comfort zone that you know is outside of other people's? And I'm going to take following processes or developing better processes off the table, because that would just be way too easy for you.
Yeah, sure. No, I would say being vulnerable. Like, being willing to be vulnerable, talking to strangers, walking up to strangers, be like, hi, I'm Sheila. Or, hey, I love your shoes. Or I always get this whenever, especially I'm with family and stuff, they're like, did you know that person? I'm like, oh no, you were talking to them. Yeah, like we're taught not to talk to strangers, right? We're taught as kids, like it's safe. It's, you're supposed to not talk to strangers. And I'm not suggesting kids go and talk to strangers. Yeah. But I think, the talking, the being vulnerable, the being willing to be sort of in the space where I'm also learning as I'm helping someone else learn, like talking to big groups of people, those sorts of things. This is all around vulnerability. And, I've had a very interesting life, and we'll talk about that later. But definitely, I think it's being vulnerable, like being able to just say, I'm wrong, to say, I don't know everything. Okay. So let me learn that thing so that way I can then get better, Yeah.
Yeah. No. That. Yeah. The ability to say you're wrong and be vulnerable is something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, including myself. Because you're like, really? I think a lot of that comes from how you were raised, and just the idea that you got to have it all figured out. And what does it mean if you actually say you don't know? It's something I've had to work on. I'm much better than I used to be, but there's certain professions. I would say, you're an attorney.
Right.
Most clients don't want to hear, well, I'm not really sure, from their attorney. They want to be like, well, how much do you think I can get? And they're like, well, this is how it's going to go. Or like, hey, here's how the law says. So that's an interesting tension that I hear is, I don't know, but I'm going to find out, for like real expertise professions. Or my tax accountant, I don't want him to say, well, I'm not really sure how the IRS is going to treat this as an expense. I want to be like, this is exactly it. So interesting. Very interesting.
Well, I think it's being okay with not, it's the not knowing, right? I don't like to not know, right? Yeah. I don't like to not know, but I will go find the answer, and to be able to say that, Yeah.
So flipping that coin over, what's something that is uncomfortable for you, and that that other people, no problem?
Yeah, that's the flip side of that, right? That's the not knowing. Like, so back to this human design piece, like, I'm a one line. I'm an investigator. I want to know everything. I want to know all of the stuff. Just give it to me. I want to learn it all. I want to learn something new every single day. And not knowing, I don't like that.
Oof.
I don't like it. It's not comfortable. It's like, it feels like being blindsided by something that I think, right? This is an expectation, something that I think that I should know, when in reality, there's no way that I should know it. So my husband and I were having this conversation the other day about why we don't play competitive games in the house anymore. So we're big gamers. So we only play collaborative games, like collaborative card or board games now, because we can't play. I can't play competitive games the way I used to. And this was actually, I would say this is probably prior to law school. I used to be able to do this a lot. I was in a gaming group. We used to play all kinds of stuff. But now I'm like, give me 10 rules. I just want to know those 10 rules. And I want to be awesome at these 10 rules. Right. And so we're having this conversation the other day about how we don't play these games anymore. And he's like, I just want us to play, like, there are games I want to play with you. And I'm like, I get that. But I don't like it when you know a rule that I don't know because you've played the game more, and then I get caught. Boy. And he'll play a card, he'll make a move, and I'll be like, you can't do that. He's like, yeah, you can. I'm like, where? Show me in the rules. And he'll be like, this is where the rule is. He'll show it to me, and I'll be like, I didn't know that. And then, but all I can think in that moment is like, I would have changed my decision 10 steps ago if I'd known that was something that I could have done. And like, that's really, like, that's a growth opportunity for me. Like, I recognize that, but in that moment, it's like, it feels like blindsided, like ripping apart my soul,
Oh, man.
So it's like this flip side. It's like being vulnerable. Yeah. I can do that, but it's like being vulnerable in a spaces where I'm sort of leading the space of vulnerability and allowing others, right? Versus being vulnerable in a space where I don't know everything. Like, that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's
Have
hard.
you had the kind of breakthrough realization that you're enough without having to know everything?
Yes.
Because that's a breakthrough for most clients, right? And most people is like, you know what? I'm valuable. And it's not because I have all the answers to all of the things, which is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know I'm enough. I know I'm smart enough and kind enough and gentle enough and smart enough to go and look for the answers. But there's definitely but I think that now, understanding human design the way I understand it, I think it's the one line that I think is this investigator part of myself that like wants to know. I just want to know. Not that I want to be right. I just want to know. So that way I can take that into my big pile of information and make good decisions with it, make the decisions for myself.
Before we move on, because you're talking about human design, that's obviously for those listening who don't know what human design is, it's a really cool, you can just Google human design. It'll make sense. Have you ever taken Clifton Strengths?
No.
I'll bet your number one is either learner or input.
Yeah.
And it's like the thing, do you have a really
I'm
easy
familiar
time?
with them, but
do you have a really easy time with collecting information and things and like making it useful for you?
Yes.
Yeah. That's
and
either
others.
Input or learner or both.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. So Sheila, now we're going to move and talk a little bit about speaking, which I know you do. So give you 5 minutes on a world stage. You talk about whatever you want. You get 5 minutes. What are you going to speak to us all about? And what's your call to action at the end of the speech?
I want to talk about expectations. I want to talk about how expectations are at the root of everything and how we believe. So expectations are just messages, right? They're messages that we have learned throughout our life. And I come from the perspective that, and they're coming from everywhere, right? They're coming from our parents, they're coming from our friends, from TV, from media, from clergy, from
podcasts,
aunts, uncles, everything, podcasts. Well, especially like as an adult, expectations messages you're getting, but also like growing up, like, and those aren't necessarily the same thing because you're looking at them through different lenses, right? But expectations, and that, so I come from the perspective that everything is based in expectations. there are four main types of expectations. The first one is expectations that we have of ourselves. The second one is expectations that we have of others. And that caveat to that, that we have explicitly said that we have of them, right? Like explicitly telling them this instead of having an expectation that you don't ever voice, right? Expectations that others have explicitly said that they have of us. And then fourth, expectations that we think others have had, like that others have of us.
Love that.
Those are assumptions.
Yeah.
And we all know what happens when you assume, right? This is one of the very first things that my father taught me. Like when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
Yep.
And so in that four types of expectations, everything we do, every decision we make is based in an expectation. We don't talk about it that way. We just say, oh, well, this feels right, or, oh, this is right, or, oh, this is what I should do or could do or would do if, right? These are what ifs with a judgment in the middle. And when I'm thinking about like my decisions, the way that I want to live my life, I'm constantly thinking about it through the lens of an expectation. Like, is this an expectation I have of myself? Or is this an expectation that someone else somewhere along the way has told me that I'm should do or could do or would do? You know, like, you're really great at arguing. You should be a lawyer. You're really great at reading and writing. You know, writing, you should be a lawyer, right? Or a journalist or a copy. Like, we're told these things as if, you know, growing up, we're, you know, programmed with these expectations of ourselves that then we grow up, we become adults, and we go into these careers that we think that we're supposed to do because we're quote unquote good at something, which is an expectation. Yep. And then you realize 2, 5, 10, 7 years in, you're like, crap, this is not for me. I don't want this anymore. Now what? Fuck. Right? Like, did I just waste my whole life? No. I'll say this now, like, you didn't just waste your whole life, right? What you did was learn that that's not an expectation that you want to live up to anymore. That explicit or implicit expectation that you learned about yourself, and that you can, which is the next piece of the puzzle, change that expectation. You can change the expectations you have of yourself, even if others still have a different expectation of you. Do you want me to say that again?
No, I'm processing that.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just thinking of, I'm looking for myself as a married person, how that might be fraught with risk. I can imagine you like, so listen, babe, I realized the expectation is that I'm not expecting myself to do those things you want me to do anymore. I learned it from Sheila Wilkinson. You can find her at her URL. Here's her phone number. She told me the right way to do this. Right way.
The right way is your way, whatever that is, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we just live our lives pretending this is, you know, I kind of liken this to this, like, there's a Ram Dass quote about wearing costumes, and about that we spend our whole lives convincing everyone else that the costumes that they're wearing are correct. And I'm of the opinion you should just take the costume off. Like, if it doesn't fit, if it's itchy, if it bothers you, if the tag is rubbing at you wrong, just take the costume off, because there's something about the expectation of what you think you're supposed to be doing. You know, I work with I work with service-based entrepreneurs, right? Like, I help them figure their shit out. I help them figure out how they're going to change the expectations that they have had their whole life and turn it into something more beautiful, more joyful, more like fully embodying themselves. And in that, they realize, oh, I have this expectation of myself, and I don't want to have that expectation anymore. And then what do we need to do to let that go? Sometimes it's just letting it go, and it's as simple as a snap, right? Yeah. But sometimes you have to like unpack some other stuff that's attached to that expectation and figure out, like you're saying, you know, you tell your wife, like, I know you expect me to take out the trash, but I don't like taking out the trash. What I would say to that is, awesome. Well, right, exactly. Nobody likes taking out the trash. Who can take out the trash if it's not you? Right? Like, who else can take out the trash? Does it have to be you? No, of course not. But there are things that we have to do as adults But in the grand scheme of things, your life is your life. If you don't like the costume that you're wearing, you can take it off, you can change it. And, I find a lot of, so this is what I was going to say about service-based entrepreneurs. Like I find, like I work with a lot of lawyers. I work with a lot of yogis somehow. I work with, social workers. I work with accountants. I work with these people who are supporting others in their lives. So they take on this persona of being the guide, being the person who helps people get from point A to point B. Well, most coaches, most attorneys, most people like this are like they think that they're taking people from point A to point B. But for me, I want to know whether this point A that you're at is actually your point A, or if it's a point A in your life where you think you are, but is not actually right for you. And then I love all this other stuff of like this like yucky, muddy stuff. This is the stuff I love, right? Before point A, to make sure that when you do make that next step, you're making the right next step for you. Not just because some marketer told you want, whatever in your life, like you want 6-figure business, follow my process, right? Like it makes me crazy because that's not going to get you what you want. Looking externally is not going to get you what you want. Looking internally is what's going to get you what you want. I wrote an article with Kim Malone for the American Bar Association, and it was about like alternative legal careers in this like COVID world, right? And one of the things that I was like, I had this idea, and I said, okay, the idea was how many questions are out there about what to do with your law degree, right? So just as an example, right? So I Googled what to do with a law degree. Well, you get like 9,200,000, right, results. But then if you change the question to what do I want to do with my law degree, you get 5. You get 5 results, 10 results, right? Because the question is internal. Google can't answer that question. A coach can't answer that question. A lawyer can't answer that question. An accountant can't answer that question. Like, what do you want to do? What's legal? What's okay? What's ethical? But also, what do you want to do? And I think the expectation that we can tell the truth about what we want, that's deep-seated, that we're taught we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to tell people what we want. We're just supposed to just be grateful for what we have and suck it up because others have it worse. That's no way to live, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
I love that, Sheila. Yeah, the thing I like to say, sounds like you've probably used this as well, is if you can Google the answer to what you want from me, you don't need to talk to me. You don't need to hire me. You don't need any of those things. And there's a lot of things you can't Google. The main one being what's true for you.
Right.
Unless you blog about it, and then I can Google it. Be like, hey, Ms. Sheila, like Sheila Wilkinson, what's true for her? Oh, she wrote a blog about it, but then that may have been a year ago and it's probably changed. So let's go take a brief commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
Okay.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
Sheila, we're back. And at this point, I'd love to know what else you want all of us to know about you.
Anything they want?
Whatever you'd like to say. The person who's comfortable with vulnerability.
No, I literally mean that. Like, whatever seems most interesting. If you have a question, like I want you to ask
well, you
the
had
question,
mentioned,
right?
Yeah, well, you had mentioned, and we'll keep this brief. What I'm interested is, you had mentioned before that you've had an interesting life. What does that mean?
Oh, all right. So both of my parents, so I'm an orphan. So both of my parents died when I was young. My dad died when I was 12, my mom when I was 16. My father had an affair. He contracted HIV. And then my mother contracted HIV from him. And then they both died. My sister was born in 87, like right at the height of the HIV epidemic. And so my lens of life is that life is short. Like, my lens of life is I want to live for now. I want to live for today. I want to enjoy the life that I have because I might not be there tomorrow. You might not be there tomorrow. I want to make every moment that I have count. And so I raised my sister. So we lived with family for a year and a half, 2 years. And then I graduated, and then she came to live with me, and I raised her. And so I always worked full-time, went to school full-time, raised a kid that was not mine, and also did everything that I thought that I was supposed to be doing. I did everything that I thought I should be doing, right? Like being the responsible one, sacrificing myself and what I want for others, never doing the thing that makes me happy, always making sure that I paid my way and never took a handout, or what I perceived to be a handout, right? And my life is been framed by this. So, we're in this COVID world right now. And for me, a large part of COVID for me has been reliving childhood trauma, right? Like, why don't people care more about each other enough to just wear a mask, right? Like, that's not a judgment, but in my mind, like my child brain is like, I want to protect everybody. Let's protect everybody. We have the power to do that. And so, I think what do I want people to know about me? I'm at a place now after lots of years of therapy, lots of coaching, lots of self-development and awareness. I have 2 goals every day. The first is to make a stranger laugh. And second is to be a better person today than I was yesterday. And that assumes that there will be a tomorrow. And I think for me, there's nothing that I can't learn better. There's nothing that I can't do better for myself to show up and to be the person that I want to be every day. So when you ask, like, what do I want people to know about me? It's like, whatever you want. Like, I have a ton of life experience. I raised a kid that wasn't mine when I was a teenager, right? Like, from the moment she was born, she was basically my responsibility because my mother was taking care of my father, right?
She's your half sister.
My full sister.
She's your full sister.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. She's my full sister. And so I have 2 half sisters, older half sisters and older half brother, but that's like a different side of it. That's a whole nother conversation. That's a different podcast
part 2.
Jason. Exactly. And so this, like, being vulnerable, right? Like, there are people out there who don't want to answer questions about themselves. But I'm like, whatever. If you want to ask me a question, I will tell you the answer. If I don't want to answer it, I'll just say, I really am not comfortable in this moment of having this conversation, but let's put some time on the calendar and we'll talk, like, we can talk about this then. Yeah. And then that gives me the space to be ready to have that conversation with people,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great segue. So first of all, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What a great segue. You're a podcaster. Yeah. I'm going to be your guest here. I know you also have a great podcast. And so at this point, what do you want to ask me that I can answer for everyone here? This feels dangerous.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you sure?
Anyway,
I was like, is he gonna? Yeah,
well, it's funny because I've been doing this part on the show for probably 120 episodes. I've had just some absolute easy layups, and I've had a few things where I'm like, oof. So yeah. I've had the gamut. I have a feeling this is going to be more of an oof than a layup.
Yeah, thank you.
Ready.
I appreciate that you recognize that I'm going to ask you a question. That
I'm also looking at your face. I'm like, you have like an evil grin on your face, right? All right, Sheila, hit
me. Okay. Maybe the question is, do you feel like you're living your life? Like, does that make sense? This question, or an expectation. I love that you asked me a close-ended question. We can make this very quick. Yes. Okay. If you would have asked me 4.5 years ago, I would have said no. Mm-hmm. So this is a new experience for me. Mm-hmm. I'll expand on it. It's a new experience for me where I get to get up. Well, first of all,
we have a second human in the house, which, you know, most parents will say, oh, I never knew I needed this kid. But then like when they're there, you're like, oh, that was what it was meant to be.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I'm thinking about this from the context of my career, just for this conversation. I get to wake up every day and make money doing things I love doing. I never knew that was possible for most of my career. And I actually really liked a lot of my career. Like I worked in sales. I was one of those people. It's like, oh, that actually made sense. And I was never where I'm like, oh, I hate this. Like I hated certain things about it, but I never hated anything about my corporate career. But if somebody would have said, you know, I'm not going to go into what I've done today and what I did yesterday and what I'm doing tomorrow. But if I was to show you my calendar and say, I'm doing this with this person, recording with Sheila, and somebody's like, oh, and this is actually what you get to do and you make a good living doing it, I'd be like, that sounds insane. So I do feel like the answer to that is yes, most of the time for me now. And, you know, it's kind of ironic because also if you would have said to me 4 years ago, hey, you're going to go to Nashville and hang out with these awesome people that are doing similar things to you or maybe different things, but they all have a similar look at integrity and ethics and who they want to be in the world, I'd be like, what? I'm like, you mean it's a sales kickoff in Vegas where I'm going to go with a bunch of other, quite frankly, people that look just like me? And you can take that for whatever it means. So yeah, the answer now is for the most part, yes, which is really why I'm experiencing more joy than I've ever experienced in my life.
Good.
For sure.
That's the point, right?
And that's the point.
And I've been listening to your show for a while. Obviously, we've known each other for a handful of months now, you know, and I feel like it's lovely to see someone living the expectations of their own life that they have and being open about the fact that they have these expectations, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's hard. Right? It's hard to leave the security of your corporate job or what you perceive to be, let me rephrase, what you perceive to be security of your corporate job.
Exactly.
And you could be fired tomorrow with no warning, with no severance, no nothing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. I guess the last thing on this, and great question, by the way. The last thing I would say, and I have talked about this before, what I've come to realize, and this goes back, I think, to human design, is the more fun I'm having, the more money I make, the more I keep doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I look at, again, if I was to put my calendar on and we were to look at, I go, that's a complete blast. That's pretty fun. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's And I could actually point at that and be like, and that pays me the most and that pays me the second most. And like, cause you know, I'm like you, I do a number of things. And that's also something that like was not in my sphere of like possibility 4.5 years ago. I had no idea. Working corporate, you go and you get a paycheck, made a good paycheck, and you go and you sell some stuff, generally sold a bunch of stuff. Then you get a commission check and you go do it all over again.
Right.
It's like an attorney, right? Like get a client. What do they need? Solve their problems. Hopefully you get paid. Hopefully you win some stuff and then you're on to the next. So great question. Nobody has ever asked me that, which is not surprising based on what I knew about you, but now what I'm learning about you. So now I'm going to rip this microphone back before you, and let's get more
before I ask you a follow-up question.
That's it. Done. Vulnerability over.
Yeah.
Sheila, let's see. I want to ask you as we start to wrap up today, I want to ask you, I don't know, because I think you're such an open book. It's always interesting when I get a guest like this. I want to ask you, switch my order around a little bit and ask you what you're afraid might be true about you. Nothing. You're like, that's all I'm going to, I will say, no, Sheila, I'm laughing. And I think you get this every now and again. I'll get a guest be like, nothing, there's nothing. I believe. I'm like, you're so full of shit.
Yeah. Yeah. You want
and then I'm like, well,
honest.
So what did you spend yesterday doing? I don't say that, but I'm like, I can point, you can tell me what you spend your time doing. And I can guarantee you, I can almost assess what you're afraid might be true about you.
Yeah. I'd probably say that I'm not as funny as I think that I am. So I'm like the queen of dad jokes. If there's a dad joke to be had or said, I'm going to say it. And I think that there's just a certain level of like humor that not everybody gets, you know? Nope. But I think that's definitely something because I want, and this is the thing, right? Like if one of my goals every day is to make a stranger laugh, it's not necessarily, this is what I tell my students too, right? Like I don't care if you're laughing at me or with me. As long as you are laughing, that counts because that means that in that laugh, in that moment, you were vulnerable. You allowed yourself to feel something that you weren't feeling before.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
man,
I don't care if people laugh at me. That's fine. Like if y'all are laughing at me, that's fine. Cool. But also you're laughing. So that's good. I'm happy with that. That's like, it's something.
You're accomplishing one of your two goals.
Yes.
Make somebody laugh.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Sheila, are you willing to be put on the spot right now?
Always. If I don't want to answer the question, I won't.
I'm a fellow dad joke connoisseur, but I have a terrible memory and I don't have anything good right now. First of all, separately, I'm going to send you a couple of Instagram handles that are brilliant. There's this one guy that I'll send. Oh, he does a lot of Star Wars dad jokes, which is just my cup of tea.
Yes, please.
Do you have a dad joke off the top of your head by any chance? And the answer no is perfectly fine.
Yes.
What do you hit me?
Okay. What did one strawberry say to the other?
Oh my God. No idea.
If you weren't so fresh, we wouldn't be in this jam.
Oh.
Oh God, I'm so embarrassed that I just said that.
Sheila, that's awesome. That's such a good dad joke.
I love
dad
that
jokes
joke,
are the best. Dad jokes are the best because there's like no in between with dad jokes. Either you're like you and me and you're like, oh, that's hilarious and like so bad but good. I have a friend that we helped lead a coach training program, and every dad joke, no matter what it was, she just like close her eyes and shake her head and go, oh. And then another person on the team would just die. It's like, do you know anybody who's like, I can kind of dig on dad joke. Either you love dad jokes or you hate them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love them. Well, that's a good one.
And I love that one because if you're a kid, you get it because it's jam. But if you're an adult, you get it because it's fresh, right? Like you get all of the nuance of a joke, and it's like, it's just about strawberries, but it's not about strawberries, right? It's like all of the consequences of your behavior are in this one, I love it. I love it. It's like my favorite.
Offline, I'm going to send you this Instagram handle and you were going to be like,
please.
Oh, you're going to be aware of this bit. If you're not already a follower, it's like, where have you been all my life? I'm going to shout it out here. Actually, I see Fit Dad CEO and his jokes are funny and he calls his kids dummy. So it'd be like, my son said this and he'll go, no, dummy. And then he'll say it, but then he has a second punchline. It's so good. Fit Dad CEO, if you're listening and you want to come on the show, and I'd love to have you on. Maybe I'll hit you up on Instagram. But you're going to love it. Well, Sheila, what's you've obviously had like you said, a very interesting life. That is, could not think of a more opposite background for me in terms of what you went through as a child or like as a young woman, and then like what you had to go through. So curious, what's the thing that, if you had to narrow it down to one thing, what's the thing that you're most proud of? Dad jokes.
No,
You're like,
being able to bust out
an encyclopedia of dad jokes.
Yes, my endless encyclopedia of anything, right?
Yeah.
Not addressing your question, but to that point, not addressing the question. I'm gonna come back to the question, but addressing that point. When I was a kid, when I would get in trouble, my mom would like make me write lines, right? Like, I will not blah blah, whatever it was.
Like Bart Simpson.
My dad, I will write on the board, right? But my dad would make me write the dictionary and the encyclopedia, so that then I was learning while I was writing, which made me fall in love with words, with language, with, how we express ourselves. So I, credit him for that. So one thing I think that I'm the most proud of, say maybe not being a statistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was an orphan at 16. My sister was 8 when she became an orphan, right? Like, every single thing in the world that could have gone wrong for us went wrong, right? Like, we lost our parents, HIV, going from family to family, being a single mom as a teenager, all of the things. But I got 4 degrees. I got my undergrad in sociology, my master's in social work, my law degree, and then I went and got an advanced law degree abroad in Brussels. My sister and I she graduated from high school, and I graduated from my master's program on the same day at the same time. We weren't at each other's graduation, right?
Yeah.
But she had a double undergrad with education and science with a minor in chem and math, And she's made an incredible life for herself. And she's built a life for her child. Like, she had a child and she raised another amazing human being. Like, I raised an amazing human being.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like stopping generational trauma. Like, just creating the spaces for us to live our best lives, despite the fact that everything that happened to us should have made sure that we didn't.
Yeah. Man, I can't think of anything that would be a better answer than that. Because everything else you've shared with us is in there. Like, all that's the container that this all sits inside of, as I said, like your sister and the loss and everything, it's all inside of there. So yeah, just, that's really, really touching, and you should be proud. I know you know that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So Sheila, let's lighten the mood. No, I'm kidding. Okay. You don't need to lighten the mood. But no, let's talk about.
They can't see that I've got tears in my eyes.
She's got tears in her eyes.
Tears.
And we don't like emotion and vulnerability on this podcast.
Oh,
let's do some more dad jokes. No, I'm kidding. No, but I do want to wrap up today and talk a little bit more about you, because you've alluded to it, what you do. So I want to talk about what you do. And I also know from, I also saw Sheila in real life last week, which was delightful. See, because as a total extrovert, I'm like, please, people in person, not just on screens.
Not just.
You also have a new cool thing that you just came out with. So talk to us about, like, what do you, you've mentioned this, like, what do you do? Who do you work with? And then what do you have for the audience? Because you said you have something pretty cool for the audience. Then we'll wrap up with some words of wisdom.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I get this question, like, what do you do? I'm like, whatever I want. Whatever.
Like, how do I get that? And you're like, you work with me.
You work with Sheila. That's how you get what you get. You want to do whatever you want, you talk to me. I mean, I've been living on 2 continents since 2007. Yeah. There's a reason why, right?
Including Brussels.
Brussels. Yeah.
Pretty cool place.
I love Brussels. God, I was a Belgium resident for 4-ish years and had a business there, and I shut it down because I was like, I don't actually need this business to do the thing that I want to do while I'm in Brussels. So I'm just going to get rid of this thing that's just creating a bunch of stress for me. I think, for me, I help service-based professionals and entrepreneurs get their shit together, like I said earlier, but they don't know what they need to get together until they know it. Like they think that they know what the problem is, but that might not actually be the problem. It might be expectations. It might be processes. It might be all of this other stuff, And I do that as a lawyer, as an attorney, licensed to practice in Louisiana. I do that as a business coach. I do that as a career coach. And I, as a social worker as well, I'm not practicing clinical, but it's like I'm transferring all of those skills and all that life experience. Mm-hmm. And then as an educator as well, I do a lot of continuing education, workshops, trainings. I go to organizations. I've done stuff with FinTech. I've done all kinds of stuff, right? Just going in and having the conversation about what it means to be you inside of this space and showing up as as yourself, the way you want to show up, and to not make excuses for that anymore. I think the happier, more joyful people can be in their day-to-days, the more that everyone benefits from that, Totally. And I think the business benefits, but also the people benefit. Right. Yeah. And so really it's just about, for me, it's about helping people figure out what their next step is, but also making sure and how they're going to get there, that planning of getting there, and then the execution of it and supporting in that. And then also the just figuring out what is your point A. And that happens as a lawyer, as a social worker, as a coach, as an educator, what is your point A? Let's figure out what that is. And then let's figure out the direction that you want to go in. So many people believe that they have to get to a destination, but it's not. Right? It's about what direction do you want to go? And let's just get you on, in the right direction. I kind of I wish people could see me, but they can't. But I use my hands a lot, y'all. But I kind of liken it to driving 2 cars on a road at the same time. So you're in 2 lanes, 2 cars, and you got a foot in each of them, right? You're just driving along. Yeah. And then one day you just take your foot out of the car you don't want to be in anymore, and you step fully into the other car,
Love that.
And
it's great visual.
Right. And building that from a place of security and safety and not from fear, and clarity in who you are and what you want, why you want it, so that you have the confidence and the courage to go and do the things. And then the more you do them, the more clarity you get. And it's that cycle that continues to repeat: more clarity, more confidence, more courage, more clarity, more confidence, more courage, So yeah. So one of the things that I do a lot working with clients is just helping them articulate the words, like the things that they want, and articulate and teach them how to say the thing, right? Prep them for that hard conversation or that easy conversation, maybe easy, but prepping them for that, and also writing the stuff with them. So creating scripts that become yours that you can use again and again and again. And so because I've been doing this for so long and I've written so many scripts in my life, I'm like, why don't I just make this into something people can take and use, right?
Yeah.
So I created this like pack of scripts, like they're templates, they're copy paste, right? There's like some prompts for where you like fill in your information.
Yeah.
But there's a pack of 10-ish, like they're 10 plus. But one of them is the freedom to vacation, and the other is the freedom to focus. And so the freedom to focus, like to use your autoresponder as a way to communicate expectations to others and clarify expectations that they can have of you, so that way you can actually focus. And same thing with the vacation. It's like actually like a 3-part where we use this script to like set expectations about deadlines and when the last deadline is to expect something, when you can actually request something of you, and then helping you with that transition time back into the office, back into being in work mode. So that way you don't feel that stress. Yeah. So that way you can actually enjoy your vacation.
What?
And I know, I'm telling you, it's like
that's possible.
It's very possible. Look, I live a very calm, gentle, loving life, and I'm very successful. Like, you don't have to live like that. Society tells us that we have to live that way, but we don't have to. So these scripts will be available. They are available now. So I'll make sure that you get the link for that.
We'll put them in.
They're on my website. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, Sheila. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on. I'm glad we made this happen. One last thing. It's a tradition on the show, which I'm sure you know if you've listened all the way through, is I love when my guests leave us with some words of wisdom. What do you got for us?
Words of wisdom. Do they have to be mine?
No.
Okay. So
outside of the rules state the contract that you signed says they should be, but if you want to break that contract, we'll do that.
Ouch.
You can have them do whatever you want.
How do you know about my love for contracts? Okay.
Because I know you're an attorney.
Because I'm oh God. Look, I should have answered that. Well, actually, contracts for me are processes. So that's a different podcast. We'll come back for that one.
Yeah, we'll have you back around again.
Or I'll have you on mine, and then I can talk about contracts there.
There you go.
So my friend Anthony Lemoyne, I'm just going to call him out here. Yeah. Unsuspecting, he didn't know that he was saying this to me when he was saying it, but I was going through a pretty not good breakup, separation, and he said to me that we cannot expect of others what we expect of ourselves, for therein we will always find pain.
Oh, I love that.
And that's
so true.
That moment changed my life. It changed my life.
Thank you, Anthony.
And I've spent the last 20 years exemplifying that, right? Like,
yeah.
All right, now how do we make this? Like, how do we put this into practice every day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
He's lovely. I love
expectations
him.
are what you either what you expect of others or what you think that they expect of you, without just having that conversation I think it's the death of relationships.
Yeah.
As I've been married for 13 years, and I look at, the 99.9% time that it's perfect because it's me we're talking about. So obviously it's just great being married to me all the time. But like I look at it, it's usually misaligned expectations.
Yep.
On either side, or unmet needs, or unsaid unmet needs. Yeah. This is like where we get into get into all those. But Sheila, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to being on your podcast, and you can teach me about processes, because I don't love process.
I will happily do that. No, I think that's lovely.
Awesome. Yeah. Sheila. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I appreciate it. It's definitely been good, and so if anybody wants to connect with me, I'm on Instagram a lot. Sheila M. Wilkinson. I hang out there, and you can also go to my website, and I think
we'll
all be in the show
all
notes.
Of that in the show notes. Yeah.
Perfect.
And I feel remiss if we didn't wrap with another dad joke. I'm just feeling it. Do you have another one for us?
Another dad joke. Yes. I'll tell you another joke. I'll tell you another dad joke. Okay. What is white, black and white and red all over?
I've heard this one, like something to do with a zebra. I've heard, but I can't remember the punchline.
It's any variety of animal that's black and white, like a penguin with a sunburn, right? So it could be a zebra with a sunburn. It could be a penguin with a sunburn. It can be yeah, I know. These are terrible jokes.
Enjoy Fit Dad CEO. I'm going to send it to you right after this call, Sheila, or right after the podcast. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Bye, Sheila.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.